My name is Ashley, and this is Let's Talk Dispatch.
I do. You're gonna do it. Do it really well.
And I believe the world needs more dispatchers.
Around in the mud, blood, and beer.
Years that I'm not working 4th of July. 4th of July.
And community policing, right? What about community dispatching?
So on this show, with the help of my guests, we will educate, empower, and support the heroes behind the headset.
Right.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode here of Let's Talk Dispatch with me, Ashley, the Raspy Dispatcher. Really looking forward to today's episode. It's going to be a little different, but full of such amazing information. And before we dive in, let's just take a quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode of Let's Talk Dispatch is proudly sponsored by Prepared. Their mission is to be public safety's most assistive technology. Revolutionizing how we handle emergencies, Prepared is dedicated to saving more lives and making our communities safer. Learn more about how Prepared is transforming emergency response at prepared911.com. Our next sponsor is Zybex Media. Since 2020, Zybex has been creating impactful recruitment films for their customers. Zybex Media offers their expertise, providing a full range of media solutions designed to attract and retain talent for all PSAPs. Visit zybex.com/media to learn more. These partnerships help us continue to spread the message that the world needs more dispatchers. Interested in partnering with us? Head to theraspydispatcher.com. As always, thank you so much to our sponsors. With your help, we're able to continue to spread the message that the world needs more dispatchers. For today's episode, we're going to be chatting with some students, yes, students who are a part of the 911 and Emergency Services Communication Program at Seneca College in Toronto, where they are currently working on an APCO course on communication and center technology. Now, I'm going to bring all of them on, and there are a few of them, and we're going to hear about their program, how they got into this program, and we're also going to tackle some questions about text to 911. So this is everybody, and I am going to let everyone introduce themselves. Maybe just go in order here. Emily, if you wanted to just start us off, just maybe a little bit about yourself and how you found yourself in this program.
Yeah, for sure. My name is Emily, and I've always loved the emergency service career and everything that it offers for the community, supporting each other. And I found myself in this program because I was in the pre-service firefighting program, and I really enjoy helping people, and I wanted to add this to my skill set as well, so I can learn how to help people in a variety of ways throughout my career.
Awesome. Very cool. How about you, Jazzy?
Hi, I'm Jazzy. I'm 25. I decided to get into the emergency services program because originally, when I got out of high school, 5 years ago, I wanted to be a forensic scientist, but my grades did not reflect that, especially in the science area. I'm not very good at science and math. So I spent probably 4 years just thinking of other ways that I could get into this industry. So yeah, I decided to do emergency services.
Very cool. How about you, Justin?
Yeah, so my name is Justin Raju. I'm here. It's probably my second career. I've had a variety of work experience in my life, and coming from a motor vehicle accident and limited mobility on my right arm from surgery, I said I need a career change and I need to be impactful. So what better way to provide and be a person to learn how to be a PSAP and provide that at a high capacity.
Very cool. And how about you, Kelsey?
Yes, I'm Kelsey. I'm 23. I come from a family of law enforcement. So my uncle's a cop, my dad's a cop, and then my mom's with Child Protection Services. So my family life was a little different growing up compared to my peers. Dinner conversations was about my dad's calls sometimes. I'd often hear stories about when he was on SWAT team years ago. So you could say I'm kind of a little unfazed about a lot of stuff because I've heard it all. So I've kind of struggled since I got out of high school to figure out what it is that I want to do. So I've just been bartending until I figure it out. And then about a year ago, there was in my city a new facility for the police headquarters. And my dad was giving me a tour of the headquarters. So it was super cool to see like the interrogation rooms, the cells and everything. And then he was able to bring me into the PSAP, and I was just like blown away when I was in there. I was just looking around being like, oh my gosh, I could do this. I would be so good at this. And here I am. So
Amazing. Well, thank you all so much for jumping on. And I feel like it's a little later on your guys' side. So thank you for being willing to jump on at the time you guys are. And it's just so cool to hear that there is a college course that is dedicated to, educating folks on this career. The Raspy Dispatcher started partly because I got my undergrad and graduate degrees in administration of justice. And then I became a dispatcher and I reflected on my higher education, and we never talked about dispatch. And that's really one of the main reasons that the Raspy Dispatcher kind of came to be. So it's awesome to hear that there are programs out there that are highlighting this awesome career choice. So what does your guys' program specifically focus on? Kind of broad strokes, what does it look like for you guys?
Anybody could speak out, or do we have
Anybody, please.
Sure, I'll go for it.
Oh, yeah.
We learn a lot about how to communicate effectively with the caller, what we should expect when different types of callers call in, and how we should communicate with them accordingly with what they need, being ready to doing many things at once, and learning each system that we're going to need to use while we facilitate, sending out resources, making sure that they feel safe, even if it's only us that they can hear. That provides them with that feeling of safety in that situation, and finding their location as quickly and as possible.
Very cool. So Kelsey, you obviously have some background with first responder, and you have some exposure to this world. Even with that exposure, when you went to this program, what surprised you the most about what you learned about the realities of 911 dispatchers?
I would say the biggest thing is, and this also goes with like what I've learned so far in the program, and then also talking with people that I know that are working in a PSAP, not knowing the conclusion of a lot of calls. That was, it never really crossed my mind. Like you hear about like the worst moments of someone's life potentially, and then immediately once help is there, boom, the call's ended, and you just like don't really hear the end of it. Like obviously I know that you can like look up the report and find out what happened, but that was probably the biggest thing that I didn't really think about.
No, it's true. And I think one thing that is extremely different between in the field and dispatch is that when we send our units to high priority calls, they're stuck on that call for maybe the entirety of their shift, right? Like if it is a shooting or a violent crime, even a domestic situation, they're going to be stuck on that call for hours. Whereas I sent that call out and now I got another call coming in. So that is definitely a reality that I think we don't talk about enough, that we are dealing with in our dispatch centers. Jazzy, you pivoted, which as someone who has done a lot of school, I don't think we acknowledge how often we should be pivoting as we're trying to figure out what the heck we want to do at 18, 19, 20, 21 years old, right? So you went from this heavy science, focus to essentially this first responder work. What has been eye-opening for you in this pivot at this time in your life?
I feel like it was really eye-opening kind of to just like start this program and then kind of realize that this suits me better. Like I was really, for a long time, I was really focused on like more of the criminology like aspect of, law enforcement, etc. But yeah, I feel like it was kind of eye-opening to just get into this and like realize that this suits me a lot better than, because I'm not good at science or math, and I feel much more like engaged in this and interested in pursuing it than I was in criminology and forensic science, etc.
As someone who's cheated through every math class they have ever taken, and I'm comfortable saying that because I've admitted it on my backgrounds. I tell you, math is terrible. It's a terrible time.
Not my strong suit for sure.
Justin, what have you found most eye-opening or just astonishing with investigating or deep diving into this field that you didn't know before being exposed to it?
So with my exposure coming from a variety of careers, owning businesses, and being into my second career, being 45, with 2 kids in a household and stuff like that, the lack of, say, technology advancements within the PSAPs and learning about that and how us, the new generation coming into it, we're going to face that head on. We're going to get text to 911. We're going to get video to 911 because if we're going to look at a longevity of a career for the next 10, 15 years, these things are going to be the forefront. And knowing that these kind of technologies are taking like 20% of the market share inside of United States, and it's impacting almost 80 million people, to be on the forefront of that, on the cusp of that, is truly remarkable. It's truly like breathtaking because we're going to transform people's lives at an instant level, right? Very real time, right?
It's very true. And I think one thing that is constant in dispatch is change, and yet we in dispatch hate change. And it's just a funny contradiction that we have, that we need to be embracing more. Especially when it comes to technology and recruitment, because at a certain level, the more technology advances, the more our applicants are going to expect us to have this technology available to them to make their jobs easier, and to obviously help citizens who are calling for help. I started dispatching in 2018, and a year after I started dispatching, we got text 911. We got rapid deploy put into our center, which is just a locating software that has better locations than just when you're calling in on your cell phone. So just since 2018, that's only 6 years ago, these jumps in technology, which when you think about it, it's like we don't have that yet. And it's like we only just got it, and we're still trying to implement it across the states. But you folks had some questions in regards to technology. What questions did you guys have in regards to that?
I guess we'll start with talking about text to 911. So we've kind of dove into that as a group. But do you want to just talk about how it's impacted your career as a dispatcher? If you have any personal experiences, how it's influenced the work on the front lines, like any feedback that you have from officers? Just kind of dive into that.
Yeah, so text 911 is an amazing option. And if you're listening and you have no idea what the heck we're talking about, text to 911 is exactly what it sounds like. Instead of texting your friend or your boo, you text 911, and that text, if the area has text to 911, will go to a dispatcher's computer screen. The good thing about text to 911 is it operates the same way as a live call. Obviously, we get better and quicker data from a traditional 911 call. So we do always encourage folks, when able, to pick up the phone and dial 911. But there are certain scenarios and situations where text 911 is going to be more appropriate. And typically, if you can't speak due to any type of emergency, medical or criminal, if it's unsafe to speak, utilizing 911, or if you are deaf in the hard of hearing community, having any speech impairments, you can use text to 911 in order to communicate effectively with the dispatch centers in your area. Now, text to 911 is available in approximately 40 to 50% of the United States, but the knowledge of text to 911 being a thing is not that great. So the amount of text to 911s that I've personally received in my career are lower than I would like them to be. And this goes back to like, are we needing to do better in educating folks, the resources that are available to them through their 911 emergency services? I've had people send me their mixtape on text to 911, and don't know how that happens. When you text back, they're like, "Oh, that was an accident." I'm like, "How? How do you accidentally type 911 and then copy and paste your mixtape link and then send it over?" But I've also had people use it when they felt unsafe and unable to talk. Recently, I've had someone text, they were at a park, and they thought a unhoused individual was following them. So they were able to text us, tell us where they were, give us a description, and we were able to make contact with that individual and keep this person safe without her ever having to pick up the phone and dial 911. Any thoughts
Perfect.
about all that?
That's perfect. That's and it directs me to a next point. And on
Awesome.
Where we are with our project, there's a key situation that happened. You might have heard of it. It's called Denise Amberley. Denise Amberley is a key scenario where a lot of the PSAPs had to change and change based on what happened in that scenario. Now, let's go to that situation, Denise Amberley, and you had text to 911 because she was calling. A variety of other people were calling into the PSAP, trying to really coordinate, saying, "Hey, she was abducted," and maybe mixed communication was there, but the communication was there. That's relevant, right? We know that that's fact. But when we got to her, we found her buried. She was dead. So how would a technology like this, from your take, Denise Amberley, would have been effective? Do you think it would have?
So I'm actually very familiar with the Denise Amberley situation. I have vendored at the Denise Amberley conference they have begun putting on. I believe the next one is going to be their third annual conference. And that specific case is a little tough when it's in reference to text 911 because though Denise was able to get a couple of phone calls out, she was still kind of restrained. So I don't know if she would have had the ability to shoot off a text per se. But it definitely spoke to our ability to communicate between jurisdictional lines. Denise's case was also very unique in the sense that her father was an officer. So the response that she received was much more quick and much more expansive than maybe another person would have received. So the fact that they weren't able to connect and find her before the unfortunate situation occurred was tough. And it was definitely when Nathan, who is Denise's husband at the time, does his story, he does do a whole session in regards to this situation. He calls it the perfect storm. You know, everything went wrong that needed to go wrong to create that situation. Back in the day when agencies would communicate about abductions or like big events, they would be put on a fax that was on a specific side of the room. And so the dispatcher who was supposed to be monitoring that fax left early that day. And so the fax with all that information got on the printer and was missed for a good amount of time. So technology would have certainly helped pinpoint some things, but I think in Denise's case, we have to account for the human error that happened in that situation. It was definitely a tough one for the dispatch community, and one we definitely refer to often when we talk about complacency and making sure that we're doing everything we can to help our callers.
It's really interesting that you brought up that her dad was a police officer. I actually had like no idea about that. And I don't know, it just makes me, I find a lot in this program and just in my life in general, I think a lot about the benefits of like, people who do know police officers, and also just like how police officers interact with like people of color or et cetera, et cetera. And I don't know. It's interesting that that's still like happened to her, despite the fact that she had the advantage of like, being related to a police officer. And it just makes me think like further about people who, don't have that benefit, or people of color, et cetera, that sometimes unfortunately are viewed in negative ways. I don't know. It just makes me think further about that. That's very interesting to me.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a reality. I don't think the response was any different. I think it just moved a little faster. It was definitely a situation where it's like, even despite having this extra leg up, we still had this unfortunate thing happen.
Yeah.
But that is definitely one of the big cases. And technology, if we had better mapping, and we had a better situation where we could have had that open line with Denise and just watch that phone move, then it would have been a better situation, which we have more access to now than we did back then, certainly.
Yeah, for sure. I also didn't know that. I don't know. I thought in the United States that like text to 911 was a lot bigger than like 40 to 50% of people. So that was also really surprising to me. Because I know Canada is like very behind on it, and I kind of just thought it was like more developed in the United States.
Yeah. No, I definitely think, and again, when we talk about our 911 technology, we're foundationally and way above my, scope of practice in regards to tech. We are still operating on old systems. And, we can have the conversation about it costs money to upgrade these systems, this, that, and that, and all those obvious things. But also, historically, I think we haven't felt like we had to update these systems because, we need patrol cars. We need, things out there in the world to do this job. And we kind of put upgrading our systems in dispatch as a last thought or a last thing on our to-do list. And I think we're paying for it a little bit now in regards to our technological infrastructure. But we're definitely trying to improve it. We do have systems like Rapid Deploy, Rapid SOS that a lot of our text to 911 is built into. The awesome thing about text 911 is if you do text 911 and English is not your first language and you're texting in your language, it will automatically translate that language to English for me. And then when I write back in English, it'll automatically translate it to whatever language that individual was communicating in. So it's definitely an awesome option for folks who do not communicate well in English to be able to text and communicate in their language that they're most comfortable communicating in.
Yeah, for sure.
I dove into Prepared 911, and it's got me so excited for where we're going to be in like 15 years in our career, just with these rapid advancements in technology, especially areas like AI, emergency services. So I'm really interested to see what's going to happen with all this, because it's not as far along in Canada, obviously.
Yeah, Prepared is obviously one of our sponsors, so they're amazing. Their technology, though, honestly, is so cool. The way that they're implementing AI into the conversation is just streamlining the things that we do every single day. For example, one of the things that they have is like transcription. So while I'm taking a 911 call, the software is transcribing what's being said onto the screen and pulling out information that is relative to whatever we got going on. So if my caller gives a clothing description of a suspect, AI will automatically detect that and pin it to the top of the conversation. Because when we're adding stuff to a call, everything starts to get buried, right? Especially if it's a call that has a lot of stuff going on. And then the officer will come up and be like, what was that description again? And you have to kind of go back and look through it. But with Prepared, they're automatically pinning all this relevant information all through AI. So I don't have to go digging through things or take extra seconds too. Because if my officer thinks they have eyes on this person and it's taking me an extra 2-3 seconds to unbury, this description that's come through 5-10 minutes ago, maybe that person takes off. Maybe we're not, maybe they lose sight. So the technology that Prepared has is just really streamlining all of our process, which in turn is most likely going to help our retention rate. If this tough job is made easier through technology, even when we're understaffed, even when we're dealing with a little bit of burnout, I have a little less on my plate because my software, my technology is making my job a little easier.
How does AI ensure the privacy and security of sensitive information shared through text to 911?
So, that's a little out of my scope. I wouldn't be able to give a guaranteed exact answer, but in dealing with the companies that I've had conversations with, especially when we're talking about allowing a department access to your video camera, when we're talking about video 911, it's reassuring folks that the information that you're allowing us to have is only that screen. And if you are texting 911, the information that you're allowing us to have is only during that interaction. So it's very limited. So especially if you give us access to your video camera, we don't just get to pop into your video camera whenever we want after that. It is only for that specific interaction, for that moment that we're communicating through 911. I'm sure there is some fancy language to and legalities in regards to the data. That's just a little out of my scope of practice. I wouldn't be able to to give you the specifics on that, but my experience has been that these companies who are creating the software are putting everyone's privacy and data at the forefront and putting options in for dispatchers to protect themselves in situations where they might not want to see something, but still be able to get that video evidence or visual to our units. For example, with video 911, there's an option that you can blur out the screen. So the dispatcher doesn't necessarily want to see it, but we need to record it for whatever reason. They can blur it out so they're not seeing it, but the units can still have access to seeing what's going on. So there's a lot of those kind of safety nets built into the advancements in this technology.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I popped in and out.
Good.
One of my computer froze on me. So anyhow, I don't know if we touched on a couple of things, but I really want to know, where do you see the landscape of text to 911 in the next 5 to 10 years? Do you think it's going to be prevalent in all PSAPs? Do you think, because we are at the forefront of NG 911, and that's going to be the implementation, because we're learning that as we go right now. Do you think PSAPs across the board, North America wide, because I know in Canada we're focused, that's a mandate for 2025, based on NG 911 coming into play, 5 to 10 years, with smartphones being on, and most of the calls coming from this device, like 90% of the phone calls you guys are getting are from smartphones. Do you think it's going to change the landscape?
Oh, 1,000%. Anyone who doesn't, I mean, come on, it has to change. We have to, just accessibility wise, inclusivity wise, we have to broaden the way we communicate with our communities so everyone has the same access and resources as close as we possibly can to be able to receive services, right? I mean, anyone who has English as their second language or has tried to communicate with someone where English is their second language has felt a little bit of frustration. Now sprinkle in, you're in the middle of an emergency, you're talking to a 911 dispatcher and they are not understanding you because there's a language barrier. So creating technology and resources to help with that so we can speed up the information exchange in order to get folks the help they need as quickly as possible and decrease the amount of frustration that goes into that communication is just, it needs to happen. And I think the biggest thing with text to 911, like we said, we're 40 to 50% so far in the US, but overall, less than 50% are saying they had no idea it was a thing, so that is something that we're failing at. How do these communities that we're serving not know that they have the ability to text 911? We need to do a better job at educating folks on the resources we do have available when they are available to them.
Perfect. And just to expand on that, right? And is this, because we had an amazing, with one of your sponsors, was an ambassador named Brad Flanagan.
Yep.
And we had a good chat with him just yesterday, and he was explaining a lot of things. And giving you some perspective on Greater Toronto. In Toronto, you could eat 256 days of the year in different nationalities, different languages, because you talked about English as a second language. Now, he brought up an amazing thing called Prepared Assist, AI-assisted technology. Now, knowing that, and he said it's capable of doing almost 140 languages, knowing that we're in Toronto, it's a melting pot of thing. Where do you see Assist AI in this platform? Because it's an add-on as well. It's not going to be the free service that you get from text or video, but it's an add-on service. Where do you see that taking in the next 5 to 10 years as well?
I think it's going to be a necessary thing. I mean, I think it is going to be something that is just a part of your regular routine, part of your tool belt in these centers, because it does speed up the process. It decreases the trauma that my callers are going through because they're able to communicate more effectively. For example, I work in a law enforcement PSAP, so I have to transfer folks to medical services if they need them. I don't provide medical services at so I have to transfer them. So if I answer 911, you need police, fire, or medical, and they are speaking another language, Well, heck, I don't know if they're going to need us, if they're going to need medical. I have to take time to get a translator on the line. Translator comes on the line, announces, does their spiel, and then asks the question. And now that person says, I need medical. And it's like, all right, confirm the address. I can at least get them over to medical and they can get started with their translator. At least they know the address. But that's 10, 15, 20 seconds if we have a translator on the line quickly, because that's still someone's job to answer that translation line, right? So we could be waiting for a translator for 5 minutes if no one's picking up the phone. And especially if it's a language that's not as common, Spanish speaking in California, you're going to get a translator quickly, but maybe Russian, might take a little longer, so there's those factors as well to consider.
And that's a great point that you brought up, because that's exactly what Brad was explaining to us yesterday. He was saying that when you get interpretation on the line, the third party, it's a great service, and let's not dishearten them, but it's a time. It's not in real time, as well as they have to almost do their job in secondary to what your job is, because you're trying to be the authority, trying to get a responder there.
Oh, I've had bad translators before. Like, it's not
lost in translation.
Yeah, it's tough to sometimes I've had moments where I'm like, translator, you need to cut them off. You need to get them to answer this question. I mean, there is a world where there are good translators for 911 and bad translators for 911. Not that they're not good at speaking the language and this and that, but there's just a different level of urgency when we're dealing on 911 that if you're not a 911 dispatcher, why would you know? So that slows us down too. Like, if I need the address and my translator is just letting this person go, and I'm like, well, it's 2-3 minutes now. The address has had to been said at this point. We're losing time, right? Because if this is a shooting and you're listening to the story from 10 years ago, which has led up to the shooting, like, we're not even on the way yet because we don't have the address. So, and I don't know what's happening in that exchange because I don't speak the language, right? So sometimes you have to kind of direct your translator, and that slows things down. And that's just a part of being human, right? Like, it's not anyone's fault. It's just one of those realities that exist in this third-party service that we need to implement into our systems, which assistive AI and Prepared are really trying to tackle to increase that or to decrease that amount of time to have that translation going on.
Mm-hmm. Also, Brad, and not to just keep on rambling over here, but Brad said text to 911 gives us a more better perspective on situational awareness. And he brought that key example, situational awareness. Right now, with us not using text 911, how's our situational awareness, and how's that component, and how can it be relatable to text to 911 moving forward?
I think sometimes, especially when you're in a situation where you don't feel like you can speak freely, you might be able to give a little more info through the text to 911 that you might not be able to say out loud on a regular phone call. Even if you're calling in regards to something that you have nothing to do with, right? So it's not like my person is harming me, so I'm trying to report it. It's more like I see something going on over there, and I don't want them to overhear me. I'm going to give a little more through text. So it's really everyone's comfort level and what they're able to communicate. This hard thing about text to 911 is you get kind of left on red for a moment, right? So like on a live phone call, if I'm asking a question and you're not responding, I can hear stuff in the background. I know you're still there. I can kind of figure out if something has happened to create a situation where you're not responding anymore, or, I know the line disconnected and I know you're not talking to me anymore because the phone hung up. But in a text situation, I'm waiting for you to respond back, right? There's this level of I don't know what's going on until you give me stuff. So sometimes you're in the situation where like, hi, are you still there? Hello, what's the emergency? 911. Like, whereas on a live phone call, I can kind of take room cues that aren't available through text to 911. So, there's pros and cons to every resource that we have available to us. And it really comes down to how good of a caller I'm dealing with, like that call that I gave an example of earlier with that individual in the park. Description, location, kept updating until we were there. Awesome. Perfect. But then there's folks who send one sentence and they never text back. So it's how good everyone's participating in the exchange.
Does your PSAP do video to like, because there's a component with like phones to do video text to PSAP. So is your PSAP?
We do not have video in our PSAP. We are a smaller PSAP than I originally worked at. So at this point, we don't have it, but I imagine it'll probably come down the line sooner than later.
And how would that give you better situational awareness if you had video?
Oh, it'd be amazing, especially in an in-progress situation where you can visually see what's going on. A lot of times we're dealing with people's perception of a emergency. One example I use, probably overuse, is, the caller's like, there's blood everywhere. There's blood on the walls. There's blood all over the place. And then the officers get out there and are like, there's no blood. And you're like, well, where did this thought of there's blood everywhere come from? And it's just like people's own, perception of what's going on around them is skewed. A lot of times people will call and they'll be like, I've just been robbed. Well, a robbery is different than a burglary, right? But my perception is someone took something from me. That's a robbery, when in fact, I walked out to my car. My car was broken into overnight, and that's a burglary, right? But a robbery is like someone pulled a gun out on me, demanded my stuff, and took off with it. So when someone calls 911 says, I've been robbed, my first question is always, tell me exactly what happened. And 9 times out of 10, it's not going to be a robbery. But their perception of it is it's a robbery. And if I just went with that, they said they've been robbed, we're going, that's a high priority call. And we end up there and it's someone broke their window last night,
And how many years have you been in the industry? Since 2018 till now, with a variety of PSAPs?
Yeah, since 2018 till now, I started at the Sacramento Police Department, which is a very large municipality in California in our state capital. Now I'm at a smaller agency in Contra Costa County.
What advice would you give to someone considering a career in dispatch?
Oh, that is the question I ask on every episode, so I appreciate that. My advice to anyone who is considering this career is to do your research. Not all centers are created equal. We are doing a lot of work to make this industry better, but we got a long way to go. And so you really need to ask questions during these interview process. What does your mandated overtime look like? How do you guys schedule? How do you deal with conflict in your center? Do you have a history of people leaving because of a toxic center? These are all valid questions. And then, you need to figure out what you want your life to look like. Are you going to be okay with working nights at the start of your career because you're going to get flip-flopped all over the place during training? Do you have the support at home, whatever your home life looks like, to be kind of tossed all over the place during your training? Because the training as a 911 dispatcher is tough. It is long. It is draining. It is a mental workout that is tough. And it is very important to have a support system through that process. So making sure to ask those right questions at your interview to make sure that that specific department is the best fit for you, and communicating with your loved ones that what you are about to get into so they can give you a little grace when you're really going through it during training.
Is there any common misconceptions about your role?
I think,
as a career.
yeah, I think often folks think, if you're in dispatch, it's because you couldn't make it as a patrol unit, whether it's like police, fire, or EMS. Dispatching is not a backup plan, it's a valid career option. As far as the technology goes, everyone thinks we know where they are, and I promise you, we do not. Um, Depending on the phone, depending on the carrier, we might get a good little location, but we always are going to ask where you are, so we can make sure that no response is delayed. And also that our questions are pointless. People get really frustrated when they're in the middle of an emergency and they're being asked a lot of questions. But there's definitely a purpose to the questions that we ask, and it's for the units that are heading that way to you. And especially a high priority situation, our questions do not slow down the process. That's something I have to constantly tell folks is like, hey, these questions, they're driving there. We're multitasking here. We're doing two things at once, usually three things at once. They're on the way, even though we're continuing to have a conversation about what's going on. So those are definitely the things that folks need to understand when they're dealing with 911. And again, it comes back to we need to educate folks. So when they do, if and when they call 911, they at least have some knowledge about what to expect.
So I'm a big advocate for the education. That's why we're all here. And one of my key formulas, even from sales, is a formula for assets. And it goes mindset plus skill set plus tool set equals assets. What do you think that developed? Because your mindset is there, your skill set's there, and you're continuously building on your tool set by creating a platform like this where it's open for all of us coming into the industry, trying to learn how to be more impactful, more empathetic, and providing that duty of serve. Mm-hmm. How do you go and what motivated you to make this platform, to give us this tool set, a system where we can have an access to a true dispatcher and find out the core relation to how this industry is?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, when I went through my training, which was pretty much 18 months, all the way through, and I looked back at my education and thought, well, there's nothing out there about dispatchers. We go through the same process as officers. We have a pre-employment test. We do a background. We do a polygraph. We, have all these steps that are similar. And there's no information out there in the world to help someone who does not have a degree in law enforcement or a first responder family background to understand what the heck they're getting themselves into. And then, you add on to it that in many places, dispatchers are not considered first responders. They're considered clerical workers. And yet they are walking through people through CPR. They're helping domestic violence victims. They're delivering babies on the side of the road. And yet we are grouping them with clerical staff. And then you talk about the centers that are reporting anywhere from 70% vacancy rates in this job where even if I'm not there, the phone continues to ring, right? Like, it's just a very unique situation. And all of those things combined created, initially at first my YouTube channel, which has a bunch of critical pre-employment practice. It has our podcast on it, information about interviews and how to prepare, and just somewhere where people could go when they have questions about what the heck is this interview going to look like? What is a background? What is a polygraph? Where people can get an answer. and feel a little better and decrease that anxiety. Tests suck. I don't. So whatever information that I could put out there to really help educate people, so they're more willing to go through this process, because it is long, it is tough, it is gonna make you think twice about a lot of things. So if you know a lot of this going in, you're more likely to get through just the application process and hopefully into a center to help decrease our staffing issues.
I think this was like a very impactful and breakthrough session with you to get you on. I know you went to a conference last week, Kansas. Can you touch base on how impactful that conference was to the future of the PSAP industry in North America, or in the United States for that matter?
Yeah, I got to go to Kansas APCO state conference. So APCO is an organization. We have APCO, we have NINA. Those are kind of our two big organizations that you can join. And each of those local chapters usually hold a local conference to invite dispatchers in that state to get together, train, and up their continued education, add tools to their tool belts and whatnot. So I got to travel to Kansas and do a couple sessions, host a roundtable, and do their closing keynote. And what's really amazing about conferences, state conferences in general, is just this ability to see multiple dispatchers across the state who are dealing with very similar situations in different centers. For example, Kansas was giving their banquet and telling stories of why these folks were nominated and things like that. And a lot of them kept telling stories of these moments when their radio communications would go down. And despite the radios going down, the dispatchers were able to, do ABC to continue to do their job. Well, California does not have weather like Kansas does. Kansas has severe weather. They have tornadoes. They have these things that Cali does not. So the amount of times I heard them talking about the radios going down was insane to me, because I've only dealt with radio outages maybe 3-4 times in my career. Whereas these folks, it's like a Tuesday for them, So just getting to hear the different experiences that folks deal with and how they pivot and what they do to take care of one another. It's really an impactful experience. So when you guys do get into this career and you get the opportunity to go to any type of conference situation scenario, do it, because you're going to learn so much in such a short amount of time and connect with people who are dealing with the same things you're dealing with. Thank you for listening to Let's Talk Dispatch podcast. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. You can find us wherever you listen to podcasts, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you're interested in becoming a guest on the show, or maybe even submitting your own story, you can do all that and more at theraspydispatcher.com. Until next time, stay raspy.